Welcome to another preview. We're going to be looking ahead to Game Week 8 and I'm making a few changes to the format. So I'm going to be showing you my updated team selection, which is a wildcard, and you can check out the full videos which I uploaded recently. And then I'm going to be talking about the main discussion points such as Raphinha, what's going to be happening with him, Trent Alexander-Arnold too, and what we should do with him and other assets in the defense, for example. And then I'm going to be actually just looking at each fixture, highlighting the top 5 captains, and then showing you the best team you can make for Game Week 8 specifically. So without further ado, let's head straight into the video. So from the team selection, I've only made one change, and I discussed this in my last video too. I made one change in the defense, which was Azpilicueta out for Diaz, and that was before the Azpilicueta price rise, but it doesn't matter too much anyway. And as you can see, I have 4 injury doubts, or at least doubts because of the international break, and also some slight injury concerns surrounding the Chelsea players. And of course, we've got the 2 Brazilians, and that's kind of the big talking point at the moment, and I'll be going on to that very soon. And just discussing this team, really, I want to talk about some of the alternatives I am thinking about. So instead of Ramsdale, just like I said before, I am considering Raya, potentially also Sanchez, but I think Raya would really only be the viable alternative to Ramsdale. And then looking at the defense, maybe Azpilicueta can come in for Rudiger, and of course the big missing component is Trent. I think I would love to have him, at least long term. Looking at the next 4 or 5 fixtures, I don't really think you have to have him, but looking further beyond that, you probably want to have Trent and Liverpool cover in defence. And I would be very concerned if, for example, heading into Game Week 13, when Liverpool's fixtures turn quite well and they have a good fixture run for a long period of time, not having Trent heading into that kind of period, I think it could damage my rank very significantly. And because he's only 22% owned, it actually does, I'd say, encourage me to really go for Trent Alexander-Arnold in my team. And just not going with him, I don't know, it just seems wrong. You know, obviously City and Chelsea have as good, if not better, defences than Liverpool, but Trent's attacking potential, you know, far surpasses anyone, even Chilwell, Alonso and Cancelo, who can still be really good on their day. So I think Trent is kind of the big missing component there. And one thing I could do actually is move Son down to Foden, or if not, I could move several players down, maybe Raphinha to Mbeumo. I would probably be 1.1 million short in order to just get Trent in for Diaz, which is what I am considering. And if I do get Foden in for Son, that would actually maybe give me enough money to do Duffy or Livramento up to a more expensive defender, but not necessarily Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think I might be able to, but really I'm kind of playing around with some of these ideas, and what has kind of maybe swayed me a bit more in towards maybe doing Son to Foden is because Ferran Torres is now injured with a bone fissure, I think, for around a month. So that could be pretty significant, and Foden could get even more minutes on the wing for Manchester City. So that's something I am considering at the moment. But otherwise, I just think Son is a far superior asset to Foden, and he's completely nailed. Obviously, I can understand why some people won't be too keen on Heung-min Son because of Spurs not really being, I'd say, too much of a unit offensively. Harry Kane isn't really doing the goods at the moment, so it's really Son doing all the work up front at the moment. And around that price, you know, playing for a team that's quite inconsistent and that don't even score too many goals, I can see why some people aren't too keen. There's also the fixtures over the next 4 game weeks. Son does face some pretty tough games, obviously after Newcastle, which I'd still say is a pretty easy one despite the Saudi takeover. But then you look at, for example, Everton, West Ham and United, but I do believe he can score in all of those games. And then maybe another kind of, I'd say, alternatives which I'm not too keen about is moving Townsend to a really cheap midfielder. But once again, just not really feeling it. Antonio to Armstrong or Hwang, you know, that is also on the cards, or Lukaku to Vardy. So all of these things that I've just discussed here are alternatives that I am thinking about in order to get Trent in my team. And at the moment, probably Son to Foden is looking like the best move. But at the same time, why, you know, just completely change everything to facilitate Trent? I don't think he's necessarily a concern in the short term, but looking further ahead, he's someone that I just love to have as a season keeper, really. So there may be a few changes up until the deadline, and I'll be showing you in future streams and videos as well. And of course, it is a bit unfortunate, you know, with all these kind of injury doubts and, you know, COVID cases and at least the international duty that's kind of flying around. It's really, really, I'd say, difficult to kind of balance everything out. But of course, at least we don't have COVID cases so far. That would just put another spanner in the works. But that's how my team is looking like at the moment. Not many changes from the team selection, but once again, there could be changes in certain positions and it could look quite different come the Game Week 8 deadline. Now we're going to be looking at all of the fixtures and talking about some of the key discussion points, and also at the end I'm going to be talking about the top 5 captaincy options and then moving on to the best free hit team for Game Week 8. So looking at Watford against Liverpool, the main news here is Trent and Jota. They're back in training and they are in contention to start the game against Watford, and you would suspect that Trent will start. And as for Jota, maybe it will just be Firmino coming in for him instead because he didn't get called up for Brazil. So that'll be an interesting one. Jota should be in the squad. I'm not so sure if he will be starting, but with Trent, you would suspect he will be in the starting lineup. And of course, the big talking point other than that really is the captaincy with Salah. Kind of a no-brainer decision it seems like this week, but you never know. There could be some other options that are very enticing too. Then Aston Villa against Wolves. The main news here is with Jimenez. He actually scored in Mexico's 2-0 win away to El Salvador. He scored a 93rd minute penalty, and that was today. And he has pretty much, let's say, an extra day compared to Raphinha, who is more of a doubt to start on Saturday. But yeah, Wolves have a very early kickoff on the Saturday, but there is a chance Jimenez will be at least in the squad. Will he be starting? That will be a bit difficult, and we don't know that for sure. But of course, the chances compared to Raphinha are much greater because of that extra day he has. But still, Jimenez should be a little bit of a doubt to start against Aston Villa. But once again, compared to Raphinha, probably a lot more likely. Then Leicester against Man United. The main talking point here is Varane getting injured in the Nations League final against Spain. So Man United are right now without 2 of their main centre-backs in Harry Maguire and Varane. It looks like Maguire's going to be missing this game at least against Leicester, his former club. So Man United aren't in a very good place defensively, and they haven't been keeping clean sheets anyway, even with their main defenders. So this will be a tricky situation for them. Leicester have been very poor, but Vardy has been in electric form, and if anyone can score against the Red Devils, it will definitely be Jamie Vardy. And this will be an interesting game, of course. Ronaldo actually scored a hat-trick against Luxembourg, and so obviously he's in good form as well. And this could be a game where everyone gets rid of him, and he actually does really well. But over 40% of managers still have the Portuguese international, so Ronaldo could definitely punish the sellers. And then Manchester City against Burnley, once again, the main talking point here, and I alluded to it earlier, was Ferran Torres being injured for a month, according to multiple reports, with a bone fissure, and that could be obviously very significant. Also with Phil Foden, that means he could get more minutes, and it paves the way for him to start more games, and of course, that is the main concern with him, the minutes and the starts. But if Ferran Torres is out of the equation for a month, Phil Foden has more of a chance to start even more games. But of course, that doesn't mean it's a guarantee. Sterling can still start on the left. Same with also Grealish. So obviously, it's not really, I'd say, as clear as day. And Foden can still be benched from time to time. But still, Man City against Burnley, definitely a really good fixture to target. And you can go with any of their midfielders, and whoever starts can have a field day. And then Norwich against Brighton. There's not much to talk about here in terms of injuries. But Brighton are looking good for this fixture, and even Mopé, I'll be talking about him later on, he could be a really good choice. And of course Basuma is still unavailable, and that could be, I'd say, a bit of a concern going forwards, but Brighton should be fine in Game Week 8. Then they have some tough fixtures coming up against Liverpool and Manchester City, but for the time being, they should be fine. Then Southampton against Leeds. This is the big talking point with Raphinha, and I was talking about it earlier when discussing Raul Jimenez, and unfortunately it doesn't look good for Raphinha according to what Bielsa said in the press conference just now. So he was talking about Bamford. He is out of the game. He's not going to be featuring with an ankle injury still. And then Phillips, he has a calf injury, but he has a chance of making it. And then as for Raphinha, this is Bielsa's exact quotes. He said there's no doubt that it's a short turnaround. The option he has to participate on Saturday depends on whether he will play this final game for Brazil, how many minutes he plays, how he finishes the game, and how efficient his rest is. And that's pretty much a really good point, to be honest. And in my opinion, based on what Raphinha's been doing for Brazil, he's made such an impact in both the games he's come on for against Venezuela and Colombia. I think he's going to get his first start for Brazil. And if that's the case, I think there's pretty much next to no chance of him starting against Southampton. He could maybe make it to the squad, but starting the game, I think, is another question entirely. And based on my assumptions of Raphinha starting and, using Bielsa's comments to kind of garner whether he's going to actually play against Southampton or not, I think the chances of him starting are very slim, and I think he's going to start for Brazil against Uruguay, and the turnaround is 36 hours, 32 hours, it's next to nothing. So honestly, I don't see Raphinha starting the game. Of course, I could be wrong about that. And if he does come on as a substitute, maybe they have an agreement with Brazil, then maybe Raphinha will actually play and start against Southampton. But just the chances are really slim, and they just don't want to risk an injury, which is obviously very likely. So that's the big talking point there with Leeds. Bamford is out, and Raphinha is a very huge doubt against Southampton, despite what Leeds were saying a week or two ago. But because of his scintillating performances for Brazil, I just see it really difficult for him to start against the Saints. And then Brentford against Chelsea, the main talking point here is the injury doubt surrounding Antonio Rudiger, who has a back problem, and also Lukaku, who has muscle fatigue. Now that one I think is a bit more just an excuse to prevent him from playing the third place playoff against Italy, which Belgium did lose, and just saving him for the next game for Chelsea. So I think Lukaku will be fine. I don't suspect he will be injured. I think he should be definitely fit enough to play the game. I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case. Of course, don't hold me to that. That's just my opinion. And then as for Rudiger, that's a bit more of a concern. He does have a back injury, supposedly. He did miss out on Germany's last game against North Macedonia, where they won 4-0, and Werner actually scored in that game as well, and Germany became the first country other than Qatar to qualify for the 2022 World Cup. And Rudiger could still be a bit of a similar situation to Lukaku, where they say there's an injury and it's just an excuse to have him back ready for the Brentford game. But keep an eye on that situation, and if Rudiger is out, you can move to Reece James, who's back in training, or also just any of their defenders like Christensen, Chilwell or Alonso if you want to kind of go a bit risky. And there's always Azpilicueta, the ever dependable Spaniard. So that's kind of the main injury news and topics surrounding Chelsea against Brentford. Then we have Everton versus West Ham. I'd say probably the main highlight of this in terms of the news is Antonio not going on international duty with Jamaica. So he's fully charged, fully refreshed for this Everton game, and that should be very promising for his owners. And of course, at the time of recording, only a few press conferences have come about, such as obviously Leeds United and Marcelo Bielsa. But other than that, a lot of this is subject to more press conferences and more information that we're going to receive. So let's wait and see what happens there. Then looking at Newcastle against Spurs, very surprising. Steve Bruce is still in a job. Many reports are saying that he's going to be not in a job by the time the game starts on Sunday. So that obviously that'll be a very interesting one to monitor. And that could have a very big impact on how Newcastle approach the game against Spurs. But yeah, with Spurs, there's not much to talk about there. Harry Kane did feature in England's recent game against Hungary, but he should be pretty much fine to start. He's had plenty of rest. And Heung-min Son, also another one who's actually been in very fine form over the international break. So once again, he's very appealing. And then Arsenal against Crystal Palace, not much to discuss here. No kind of new injury news so far. And of course, with Xhaka still out for 3 months, maybe he can make it back a bit sooner. And then Crystal Palace pretty much have nothing new since the last time they played. So that's pretty much all of the kind of main topics surrounding these teams. Now I'm going to be talking about the 5 main captaincy options. So in number 5, I'm actually going to go with Harry Kane. And yes, his record this season has been awful in the Premier League, but he has been doing well in other competitions. And I think Harry Kane against Newcastle, who he actually has a really good record against at St James's Park, I think he can break that duck he has in the Premier League and do well. So he is one of the best captaincy shouts this week. Maybe Heung-min Son is slightly better, but Harry Kane is still a good choice nonetheless. In number 4, I've got Joao Cancelo as a defender. I suspect City will keep a clean sheet against Burnley, and he can get an attack in return. And if he does, he'll probably be in and amongst the bonus points. So Joao Cancelo at number 4, he's probably the pick of the bunch from any of the defenders this week, even over Trent Alexander-Arnold. And then number 3, I've actually gone with Heung-min Son, and I would probably rate him a slightly higher over Kane because of his form, not only for club, but also on international break. Harry Kane was pretty poor for England as well. So it's kind of a continuation. It's not just for Spurs. He has been struggling with England as well. But with Son, he's got the form and also the extra point for the clean sheet and the goal scored as a midfielder. So I'd probably go for him. And he also is only blanked once against Newcastle. So I would back Son to do really well against the Toons. And then in number 2, I've actually gone for Riyad Mahrez. He's not someone I tend to go for, but with Gabriel Jesus probably missing out because he is on international duty with Brazil, that kind of frees up that right winger spot for Mahrez, and 30% of his goals for Manchester City have come against Burnley, so he loves playing against them. He did score a brace last time when they won 5-0, so I think he's a really good choice, and Mahrez, I think, could be the kind of standout differential. If you don't want to go with Salah, and maybe you're not back in the early kickoff, Mahrez could be a really good one-week punt. I'd even back him over the likes of Foden, Grealish, and all the others like Kevin De Bruyne, just for this 1 week. Beyond that, I probably wouldn't go for Mahrez, but just for Game Week 8, I think he's a fantastic option. And in number 1, there's no surprises here. It's Mohamed Salah. He's got a great record against Watford, and just he's in great form at the moment. He's got around 20 more points than any other player in FPL. He's just in the form of his life, and that's saying something with, you know, the performances and output he has put over the last few years. So Salah, great option, and I probably wouldn't overcomplicate it this week. But if you do want to go over differential, maybe go for Son. You could go for one of the other options I discussed, like Cancelo or Riyad Mahrez if you're feeling very brave. So here we have the best free hit team pretty much for Game Week 8, and this would pretty much be a 3-4-3 or a 4-3-3 depending on which player you prefer. So in goal, I would either go for Ramsdale or Sanchez. I think Sanchez has a higher chance of a clean sheet, but I'd rather have Duffy over Ben White just for this fixture because of the attack and returns, and you can cover Arsenal with Ramsdale. But if not, just go for Sanchez, and you could even double up on Brighton defence if you really back them for the clean sheet against Norwich. So Ramsdale, Duffy, and then we've got Azpilicueta in there. I just think he's a bit more nailed because of the situation surrounding Rudiger and his potential back problem, and also he's got a bit more attacking potential. But facing Brentford, it isn't the easiest fixture, so I would reconsider potentially not going for Azpilicueta, and you could go for another defender instead. But because Chelsea are so good defensively, I would just go for him. Ideally, you could go for Trent Alexander-Arnold, but you'd have to downgrade someone else. And of course, feel free to offer your own suggestions down in the comment section below. But I'd probably go for something like that as well. And as for the City defence, I think it's very simple this week. I'd at least go for one of them against Burnley. And because of the form that Cancelo is in, and also how good City defence are, and they're facing Burnley, who are one of the worst teams at the moment, I would just go for the double up. And Diaz and Cancelo is very simple. And also as your final defender, you can go for any budget option really. They won't be featuring in this team. You could just go for Ben White if you have enough money, and you could even arguably double up on Arsenal defence, but I probably wouldn't against Palace. It might actually be a bit of a tougher game than some people expect. And then looking at the midfield, I've just got Allen there as a cheap option. Douglas Luiz is more of a doubt because he's been called up to Brazil. Allen should be fine for the Everton game. But then looking at the rest of the midfield, as your really cheap 5.4, 5.5 million option, you can just go for Smith Rowe. There's also Townsend and Gray, also Decore, but Mbeumo is facing Chelsea, so I would not really look at him for this week. Smith Rowe is facing Palace. He could be a really good starting option, and with this team, it's between him and Duffy, depending on what you think is going to happen with the Brighton versus Norwich game and Arsenal against Palace games, and then you can just decide who you start between those two. Salah's a no-brainer. He's not under discussion. I would go for at least one of Son or Harry Kane this week if you were free hitting, and I've gone for Heung-min Son. I do back him a bit more in the captaincy list. I put him 3rd and Kane 5th, and I will just go for Son. I think he's one of the best options this week, not just for the captaincy, but just in general. I think he's a really good choice. And then we've got Riyad Mahrez. Now, you could just go for Phil Foden or another City midfielder, but I've gone for Mahrez specifically for this fixture, and I think if you are free hitting, this is the perfect opportunity to get someone like Mahrez, who you probably wouldn't want beyond this game week, but just for Game Week 8, fantastic option, and I think he could do absolute damage to Burnley. And then looking at the attack, very unorthodox. It's not something I would want to have long term. Antonio, I know he's facing Everton, but I'd still rather have him over the other options. But if you don't want to go for him and you don't really back West Ham, then maybe just go for Armstrong against Leeds. He could do really well. And there's also Hwang Hee-chan and Jimenez if you back him to start against Aston Villa. They're also decent options. I'm not really too impressed by the others because Tony's facing Chelsea, but Antonio I think can do well. And if West Ham do score a few goals against Everton, I think Antonio will be the chief source. Now I've got Neil Maupay against Norwich, and I think just the fixture really, obviously perfect on a free hit once again. Brighton have some tough fixtures coming up soon against City and Liverpool, but just for this fixture against Norwich, I think Maupay can do really well. There's also Trossard in midfield. You could go for him, and also Pascal Grosch. Maybe some of these Brighton midfielders can offer great value, but Maupay up front, he's in good form this season, and I think he could continue it for at least one more week before the really tough fixtures come about. And then I've got Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. He's not going to be featuring too much in these videos, I suspect, but he's got a good record against Palace. Arsenal are at home, and they have been a bit better recently, and I just think that Aubameyang will actually score a goal or two here. And of course, you look at Lukaku, you could just go for him. Against Brentford, there's also Timo Werner, who's been in good form. Jamie Vardy is facing Manchester United. He can still do really well. And to be honest, if you have enough money, Kane is also obviously a really good choice. But there's Ronaldo. I think a lot of people are getting rid of him. But against Leicester, who actually defensively have been very poor in terms of the underlying numbers, I think Cristiano Ronaldo could be a very good pick. It depends on what your budget is, which kind of fixtures you want to target. But definitely City against Burnley and also Liverpool against Watford. Those are two fixtures you probably want to target, so you can get a trend in there. You can get maybe some more City players in general. I've got the triple up already, but maybe you don't fancy Mahrez. You could go for someone else like Foden, especially with the news that Ferran Torres is out. But this is probably, in my opinion, the best free hit team you can make. Let me know what you would change, like I said before. And if you enjoyed this video or found it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Really appreciate all the support. And let me know what you think of this new format, kind of discussing the main topics, talking about the latest injury news and updates, talking about the best free hit team, and also the top 5 captaincy options like it was before, and an updated team selection. And if you do like that, then of course let me know. And if you don't, also feel free to raise your concerns. Thank you very much for all the support and all the feedback, and I'll see you next time.